Hello, Rabbi.
Good evening, everybody. Okay.
How's your sleep?
What sleep? What are you talking about?
I knew that. I knew that.
Okay. No, the truth is, that I'm gonna go to pray, after the class, and then I'll sleep after the prayers.
Yes, yes. I figure. I said he's wake up early and then he does the prayers after the class. I kind of figured it because of the time.
Yeah, so it's good. It's good. When you learn after midnight, they say, you get special chesed the next day.
Yes, that's
So it's a
correct.
good thing. It's a good thing, yeah. Okay. I'll just text them to remind them that we're starting.
Okay. I did to Bruria, but she hasn't
Okay.
seen the message.
Okay, beautiful. Very nice. Yeah. So here we go. Yeah, so we did Hey, so we're going to Bob. Let's try that. Yeah. So it says here, brings a tour. It says, En notnin ner al gabe ilan me'erev yom tov, right? So what does that mean? We don't put a candle on top of the tree on Erev Yom Tov. So, in other words, we don't want to have a candle which is resting on a tree. So he brings a source for this in the Bit Yosef. He says, the Per Kira, it's in Shabbat, Mem Hey Amud Aleph, ומה שנתן רבנו טעם דחיישינן שמא יבוא להשתמש באילן. So that what Shatur said, right? The reason for this is because he may come to use the tree. This is what we're worried about. כן כתב רמב"ם פרק ד', that's what it says in Rambam. והראש כתב פרק בהמה, אז זה ראש, דהדה אין נותנים נר דקל ביום טוב, לא בשביל שיהיה נקרא משתמש במחובר. So says the Rosh, the reason why we don't put the candle on top of the tree is not because he's using something which is attached to the ground. אם נוטלו משם, אלא גזרינן שמא, if he takes it from there, אלא גזרינן שמא יעלה באילן כדי לתלו. So he says the problem is like this, we're afraid he's going to go up and climb the tree. and take the candle from there. By the way, what's the problem with that? If he climbs a tree. So the problem is like this, that when you climb a tree, you're making it like shake and whatever. So the rabbis, decreed not to do that because we're afraid you're gonna like break a branch off the tree, on Shabbat or Yom Tov, which is not allowed. So this is the reason why they decreed not to do that, to climb a tree on Shabbat and Yom Tov, same thing. So yeah, so a person has to know that, like don't mess around with trees. Don't play with that stuff. So
Rabbi, is it just because of the fear of breaking a branch, or is there anything else?
yeah, because if he breaks the branch, off, he's
Hmm.
desecrating Shabbat.
Even though it could be an accident, even as an accident,
Yeah, I mean, but we're afraid he's gonna do it on purpose. That's the thing, right?
the climbing, yeah.
Right. When he's climbing, he's gonna break something off. Take a twig or something or whatever, or take some leaves, God knows, or some fruit, God, whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
Whatever is detaching something out of the ground is one of the labors, forbidden labors on Shabbat.
Okay, I
So
see.
this is the problem, right? This is the reason why the rabbis decree that. So so it says על גבי אילן ביום טוב, עד כבר יצא. דלא אמרו החכמים אלא אין נורין על גבי אילן ביום טוב, שמא יעלה באילן כדי לתרוא דלא אמרו, right. So that's good. So that's the Rosh. So he says here, כתב הקולבו, says the קולבו, אסור להניח נר על גבי אילן, מערב יום טוב, שמא יעלה באילן ויתלוש עליו. Right, so says the same thing over here, this rabbi. He says, right, not allowed to place the candle on top of the tree on Yom Tov. Why? Because we're afraid that he's gonna go up there, right, and detach some leaves, whatever, right, some stuff like or fruits, as we said, right. The have psikreshe. So it's gonna be psikreshe. What does that mean, psikreshe? That it's something which is unavoidable. So that's an interesting thing, right? What you asked that is he gonna do like by accident or on purpose, right? So here's the thing, right? What he's telling you here is that even if he does it by accident. But since it's something which is unavoidable, so therefore he would be also sinning, doing even by accident. Since you shouldn't be doing this, and it's kind of like unavoidable. What does it mean unavoidable? When you're climbing, right? There's all kinds of friction going on there. So because of that, it's very likely you're gonna drop something off the tree, some leaves, whatever it is, right? All kinds of stuff. So that's it's expected. That's the thing, right? Okay. So it says, וכל תשמיש במחובר אסור משום הגזרה דווקא למעלה מגימל, אבל למטה מגימל מותר. So he says, right, but the rabbis, when they decreed not to use the tree, right, on Shabbat or Yom Tov, they only talked about above 3 tvachim, right? But below 3 tvachim, it's okay. So what does that mean? Like at the bottom of the trunk, over there of the tree, that's okay. Um, because over there, I mean, the chances of like detaching something are not really very high, right? Talking about the trunk of the tree. So there's nothing to detach there. Adkan, right? So he says the reason is because what it says in this chapter 336, the shorshe ilan shenam givoim min haaretz. So he says, right, that the roots of the tree, which are not high off the ground, they're not higher than 3 tvachim. Mutar להשתמש בהם, you're allowed to use those, right? You're allowed to climb there, sit there, whatever it is you want to do there, right? Because it says it's considered like a part of the ground, basically, right? Anything below 3 tvachim is a part of the ground, according to the halacha. So that's the story there. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. Right, so it says the Shulchan Aruch, "En notnin ner al gabe ilan me'erev Yom Tov." We're not allowed to put a candle on top of the tree, as we said, right, on Yom Tov, even erev Yom Tov, right, which is before Yom Tov. The Chayshin and Shema Yavor Lishtamesh Beilan. Why? Because, as we said, right, we're concerned that he's going to come to use the tree on Yom Tov. So this is the reason why they made this decree. Okay, so let's go on. It says, "En pochatin ner shel cheres." Okay, we'll have to do at least the tour Bet Yosef here, and then we'll get back to this Shulchan Aruch. Let's see inside the tour here. So it says here like this in the tour, "En pochatin ner פירוש נר של חרס בעודו רך כמו ביצים של יוצר ומאכין אותו ביד לעשות לו בית קיבול, אסור לעשותו ביום טוב משום מתקן מנה, right? So he's telling you here something interesting, which is that, if you have a candle, right, and it's like kind of like the wax is like soft there, not so hard. Right, so the truth is he's not really talking about the wax. You know what he's talking about? He's talking about the clay. So what does that mean? You have the clay, right, which the candle is made out of. The clay is the container of the candle, right? So there he says um, you're not allowed to like shape it, fashion it on Yom Tov. Why? Because it's like you're making a utensil like that. So what does that mean? Like let's say you press with your finger, right? And you like round it out the clay, because it's soft, and you're like making a receptacle there. So this is not allowed. That's what he's saying. Because you're making a utensil. Okay, let's see Bet Yosef on that. So says Bet Yosef, where's the source for this? Mishnah Beperek, maybe get Kadayan. It's in the Mishnah over there in Lamed Bet Amud Aleph. Piresh Rabbeinu, so explains the tour. Ba keperush Rashi. He explains it like the Rashi. Aval Tosot, but it says the Tosot perushu sheregilim nasum ba'aviro kodem afiato. So Tosfot says that they're accustomed to place in the airspace, right, before the baking, kash, right, the straw, or some other thing, in order to guard the airspace there at the time of the baking, so that the walls should not fall in, should not collapse. Yachad and it's going to close up the air, the airspace. So it says after the baking, we remove it a little bit. We remove whatever's inside there. The alzeh kamar en pochatin haner. So he says this is what he said, that we don't reduce the candle. That we don't move what's in there. Because he's like, as we said, he's finishing a utensil like that. והר"ן פירש שדרך היוצרים לעשות כיסוי לכלי כרס שיש להם בית קיבול. So the Ran says right like this. He says that it's the way of the right these candle makers, whatever, right? The craftsmen, right? Whatever they are, right? That what they do, they make a cover for the candle, which has a receptacle. ומשימין בכבשן. So he says what they do is they put it inside the oven, right? So it should, get dry and hard. מעט, a little bit. לפי שאי אפשר לתקנם בעודם בחיים, לחיים. So it's because you can't really fix them when they're still, moist. ואחר כך מוציאים אותם קודם שישרפו לגמרי. And it says then we remove them before they totally get burned. נוטלים כיסויים ומתקנים אותם. Says we take the cover, right, then we passionate, whatever, right? Pilta netilat kisui kniket pechita. So he says when you take out that, when you remove that cover, it's called pechita. V'hainu detnan en pochatin etaneh. That's what he says, right? It means this halacha. That's what it means according to him. Klomar en notelin kisuyav. That means we don't remove the cover. Mimenu netilato mashver lekelmana. Why? Because when you remove the cover, right, that's when it becomes a utensil. So in other words, it's like a process, of right of creating this kli, right, this utensil, the candle. Okay. Then he brings the Rambam here. The Rambam piresh b'inyan acher. So the Rambam explains it differently. Right? So it seems like there's several explanations about what this Gemara means. It's like, lots of different ways of looking at it, whatever. But the main, right, the crux of all these explanations is one thing, right? The bottom line. The bottom line is you're making a new utensil, right? Whichever way you describe it. So he says, right, Rambam piresh b'inyan acher. So Rambam explains differently. He says, "Shkatab perk dalad." He says in the fourth perk, "Shnei kelim ben shem mechubarim b'tchilat asiyatan, kagon shetei nerot, o shnei kasot, o en pochatin otam leshnayim b'pnei shehu kimetakin kli." So Rambam says like this, right? Another variation of the same theme. He says that basically what it is you have like two separate utensils, which are like stuck together. And what you do is you separate them, to make them into like two separate vessels. And he says you're making a new utensil like that because you're separating them. Okay. Okay. אין פוחתים נותן לשניים מפני שהוא כמתקן כלי. וכך פירש בפירוש המשנה. So that's also in his commentary on the Mishnah, right? The Rambam, גם כן. והגלות מימון, right? This rabbi says, כתב פירוש brief. He writes the riffs, right, commentary. על זה regarding this, וזה לשונו, this is what he says. ולאו הכין הלכתה, אכן הלכתה דהה בגמרא מוקלה כיחידה. So he says, it's not really the halacha. Why? Because the Gemara says, right, this is a minority opinion. Oh, וגם מלה הלכות גדולות לא אדקרה כלל. So he says the halachot gdolot also didn't mention it. So in other words, some rabbis here hold that this Gemara is not really halacha at all. Right? It's a minority opinion, no? Negligible, right? Not not accepted. Okay, well, it says ולא כאן מלן הכי, עד כאן, right? ואני לא מצאתי להריף שכתב כן. So says Bet Yosef, right? He comments on this. He says, I didn't find the riff that he says this, like what this rabbi says, claims. So I don't see this riff. Okay, well, okay. ולא הביא אלא משנתנו כצורתה. So he just brought the Mishnah as it is, as is. Alma kasava de achin aktinan. So it must be, says, right, that we do paskin that way, according to the riff. Oh. ואולי נתכוונו לכתוב רבנו פרץ ומתיקים שגו וכתבו רב אלפס במקום רבנו פרץ. So he says, you know what, it must be like this, right? Now this is like, fancy footwork over here, but you have to have an angel to make these determinations, right? So what does he think over here? He says, you know what, it must be that there's a mistake over here, right? So what does that mean? Instead of writing the riff, it really should say here Rabbeinu Peretz, right? That's the one that he means to talk about, right? Not the riff, because the riff actually does paskin over here, the halacha. It's okay. Well, there you go, right? To learn Torah like that, you have to have an angel to help you. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to do these things. Okay, so that's the story there. All right, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch. So it says here the Shulchan Aruch, right? Let's see how it explains it. אין פוחתין נר של חרס, דהיינו בעודו רך כמו ביצים, שיוצר למעך אותו ביד לעשות לו בית קיבול, מפני שהוא עושה כלי, right? So he brings like the earlier explanation that we saw in the Beit Yosef, right? Which is that, the problem is here like this. What you're doing is basically, when the clay is still soft, you're like, pressing into it, in order to make a receptacle in there. Because after all, you want it to be a candle, right? So you need to have a place for the oil. So therefore, he says, right, that you're not allowed to do that because you're making a new utensil. You're making a kli. So this is one of the prohibited labors on Shabbat, right, and Yom Tov, making a new utensil. This is the problem. Okay, good. So let's go on. So what do we got here? Oh, that's a good one. Okay, that's an interesting one. Let's go. Right, so what does it say here? Let's look at the tour inside. We need to see it inside. And so it says the tour here, En Pochatina Ner, not this one, next one. Next one, which is right. En Chotina Petila. So it says like this, right? We don't cut the wick, right? Lishnaim. So, right, here's the thing, right? What is he telling you here? Very simple. Don't cut a wick and make it into two wicks, right? You're making it like it's like making a new thing there, a utensil, whatever you want to call it, right? It's just like, the reason why we don't cut, a piece of paper, right? To use it as a towel or whatever it is. We don't cut it on Shabbat. So same thing here, you're cutting the wick down to size, so you're making like something new, which you're going to use. Same idea. By the way, when I say these kinds of things, people sometimes ask me, like, well, are you allowed to open like a package, and cut the packaging, right, the wrapping there on the package? That's also cutting, no? So I tell them, no, no, sir, it's not the same thing. Why is that? Because there, you're not making something, right? You're breaking it. You're not making it, right? You're destroying it. So that's not the same, right? Destruction is allowed, but to make something which you're going to use, that's not allowed. So it's not the same thing, right? One is different from the other. So therefore, there's no prohibition, right? Somebody asked me a question, by the way, exactly like this. You know what they asked me? They said, "What about if I on Shabbat, let's say, it comes a package from Amazon, right? Let's say, I ordered a book, right, or whatever, right? Or from Eichler's, whatever, right? The Judaica store, right? So it comes on Shabbat, like you didn't ask them to bring it on Shabbat, but the post office does what they want. So the question is, if you receive a book, right, on Shabbat, which is like a Torah book, you can read it on Shabbat. So, the question is, right, are you allowed to open the packaging and read it? So the answer is yes. Go down to the lobby, pick it up, and read it. Why is that? Because you didn't ask them to bring it on Shabbat. That's one thing, right? So that was on their own volition. You shouldn't ask them to bring it on Shabbat.
Rabbi,
Yeah, yeah.
those Amazon boxes that have the tape where
Yes.
you open them and it says
Yeah.
Amazon. So
Yeah.
even if it's gonna cut the letters.
Right. So that's the thing, since you're destroying it, and you're not making something there, you know what I mean? So that also is okay. When you're opening a package and cutting letters, there's no problem with that whatsoever. So yeah. Even though, the Ashkenazim are a little bit more stringent about these things, but I have to tell you, according to the halacha, it's not really a problem. I mean, the Ashkenazim will tell you you can't cut this and you can't cut that, and you're erasing the letters, whatever. But the truth is, we don't really care about that because it's an act of destruction. The only time that we really care about this kind of thing is where, you're making something, right? Which you're going to use.
Like writing, correct? I
Yeah, well,
know,
writing is, yeah, it's a different labor altogether, right?
yeah. So if you write with your right hand, if you're right-handed, but then is there a shinui about it? By writing
Yeah,
with
so
your
regarding
hand?
writing, you really shouldn't be lenient with that, to do it with a shinui, like with your left hand, let's say, right? On Shabbat, Yom Tov, you should not be lenient regarding that. Because according to some opinions, right, writing is, prohibited from the Torah. So therefore, doing it with a
Correct.
shinui is not really going to help you much there.
Okay.
Um, But the truth is, right? I have to tell you, there is an opinion that says like this, which is that scribble writing, right? In other words, the stuff that we know, the handwriting that we do, right? They see that's only forbidden from the rabbis. The only writing which is forbidden from the Torah, they say, is when you're doing like professional writing, calligraphy, right? Like a sofer, things like this. But when you're just writing scribble, it's only forbidden from the rabbis. But the truth is, the rabbi, my rabbi, he wrote about this, that it should be stringent about that. And not to write at all on Shabbat and Yom Tov.
Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, because some say it's from the Torah, this prohibition. It's not so clear which is the halacha there. Whatever. Anyway, why do I tell you this? Because there is tell you something interesting. There is a custom by some communities, right? Synagogues, mostly like Sephardi, synagogues, where what they do is like this, when they sell like the aliyot, going up to the Torah on Shabbat, you're allowed to sell them on Shabbat because it's a mitzvah. Because the money goes to mitzvah, So you're allowed to sell them, but you can't give them money on Shabbat, right? You have to bring it later, right? On Sunday, bring it, right? Monday, whatever, right? Not on Shabbat, obviously. So, right, so the custom by the Sephardim was more lenient about that, and also the Hasidim also they're lenient about these things, whatever. But anyway, right? The point is that but some communities have a custom where they have a goy, right? Because they want to remember how much each person bid, for the mitzvah, so they can remember how much to charge them, Send them a bill, right? Make sure they bill them good, So, right, so what they do is, right, they have the goy write it down, so they shouldn't forget how much it was. Because they forget because it like happens all the time. It's like over and over. It's not like one thing. It's like happens like 10 times, 100 times. So people forget all these numbers. They're very forgetful. So some people have like a goy who writes down, records all these things. You know what I mean? So the truth is, that so if we say right that writing, scribble is only rabbinically forbidden, so then it would be allowed to tell the goy to do it. But if it's from the Torah. So it would not be allowed to tell the goy to do that, right? So there's as we said, there's a machloket about this, So the rabbi says like this, the places that already have this custom, to have the goy write it, they have what to rely on, because some say it's from the rabbis. But the places where they don't have a custom like this, they shouldn't start this custom, and start having a goy, writing these numbers down on Shabbat. Yeah, I remember there was one shul, that I went to, and they started this custom, they had this goy, like writing the amounts of the the sales, and so the problem was also another thing, which was he was doing this in front of everybody, which is like looks really suspicious, Can you imagine somebody sitting there on a desk on Shabbat, in front of everybody in the shul and writing, writing stuff, it looks ridiculous, So I told them to stop that. I mean, that's not really a proper thing to do. Looks very suspicious, and and also, as we said, right, if they have this custom, they can go on with it, but if not, you know, they should stop it. They shouldn't do it. That's what the Rabbi Paskin, he has a tshuva on this whole thing. Okay, whatever. Anyway, right, to getting back to what we're saying. So, right, we said that you're not allowed to, fashion the nair, right, the candle, to make something new there. Uh, right. So then we're going to a new one here. There's another one. Right. So we said we can't cut the wick into two pieces, right, to make two wicks. So let's bring the tour again, right? אין חותכים הפתילה לשניים, אבל בפי בית נרות, שנותן בית ראשיה בפי בית נרות, וצריך להדליק שניהם ומדליקן באמצע, מתיר, right? So he says, right, what was this thing they used to do? They would put like a big wick, and into like two candles, and then they would cut it in the middle, right? And have it like, resting into each candle, descending into each candle, right, respectively. Okay. So he says, right, so in other words, there's two different ways of doing this, right? Which is one is like you're just like cutting two wicks into, one wick into two, right? That's not allowed. But then he says, right, what about if you take one wick, right, and you place it into two different candles, and instead of cutting it, what you do is like you just like light it, in the middle, and this way, like it'll, become like two separate wicks. Right? So he says the Rif allows this to do it this way, the Rif on Yom Tov, right? Obviously on Shabbat you cannot do this, There's no question about that. So, אבל אם אין צריך להדליק את שניהם, אלא שעושה כדי לחתכו לשניים, but he says if he doesn't really need to light both of them, right? Both these candles, just wants to cut it into two pieces, no, then he's not allowed to do it. ואדוני אבי ראש ז"ל חוכך בא להחמיר. So he says the Rosh, is leaning towards, being stringent about this. And af befi bet nero. This is even if you're doing it like that, in the second way we just prescribed, into two different candles, but tzarich shlishnehem, even if you need both of them. Velo godlin ota velo mehavim. That's really something else. Okay, so let's see the Bet Yosef. Interesting. Lots of interesting stuff here. Yeah, so it says the Bet Yosef regarding this halacha. He brings a source, right? Mishnah sham en chotchin et petila. So there's a Mishnah. It says that, right, we don't cut the wick l'shnaim into two pieces. Rabbi Yehuda omer chotcha beor l'shtei nerot, right? So he says, the Rabbi Yehuda says, but if you want to do it that way, right, that we mentioned, right, you light in the middle and it becomes like two. So it seems like he allows that, right? Mashna besakin delo deka metaken mana beor nami deka metaken mana. So Gemara asked a question on this, right? Good question, by the way. It was also my question, which is, what difference does it make if you do it with a knife or or you just light it up, with a fire, right? And you cut it. You're making it into two different wicks by lighting it. Why is this one different from the other? The Gemara asks this question, right? So he says either way, the Gemara says you're making a new kli, you're making a new utensil. So what difference does it make? Good question. Okay, so what's the answer? פירוש רש"י, דקה מתקן מנה, אתה היית עושה, אחד היית עושה שתיים, לפי שתי נרות, נותן שני ראשים בתוך שתי נרות, אם צריך להדליקן כאחד, הוא מדליק באמצע, אתה לא מוכרח למתוקן מנה או לקם מכוון, אלא להדליקה בעלמא. Okay, so Rashi explains, right, the answer of the Gemara, that if you do it this way, you put one wick, right, one long wick, into two different candles on each end. And then you light up the middle, right, in order to separate them. So each one's going to be like, coming apart and going into its respective candle. So it says it doesn't really look like you're making a new kli there. Interesting. Wow. So what does that mean? It just looks like you're lighting it up. You're just lighting both of them, So you're doing the middle. So it doesn't really look like you're making two wicks. Interesting. Wow. כתב הראש משמע דאם אין צריך להדליק שניהם לא. So it says the Rosh, right, as we saw in the tour, that if that's only if you need to light both of them, right? But if not, you only need to light one of them, then it's not going to work, this trick. That's what it says Yerushalmi, ושצריך לשתיהן It's only when you need both them. ומדהביא הריף וגמרא שמפרש דברי רבי יהודה מכלל דספיר להלכה כרבי יהודה. So it's since the Rif brings right, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. V'lo yadana tama, he says, I don't know what the reason is. Ma yifsok kechidah k'makom rabim. So he says, good question, right? Why would he want to pass like Rabbi Yehuda against the rabbis, right? He's the minority. So why is he going like the minority opinion, the Rif? What's going on with that, right? But so he says, מקום דמשמע דרבנן עשה לגמרי עד כאן שלום ונראה שטעמו של הריף מדייתא בגמרא תנא בכפרה ששישה דברים נאמרו בתפילת וחותך ואורג לפי שתי נרות ומדסתם בר כפרה כרבי יהודה עלמא כהלכתה כבטא וכן פסק הרמב"ם פרק ד'. So he says, right, the answer is like this, that there is a Gemara which paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, so therefore, right, the Gemara says the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, because the paskins like it there. So therefore, right, the Gemara says, okay, well here, we go like the minority opinion. In other words, sometimes it happens, the Gemara goes like the minority opinion. So as long as they decided that, that's fine, we have to go like that, But if it was just up to us, right, without the Gemara telling us, so then we have to go like the majority. That would be the rule. So it says Rambam also paskins like the Rif, so he also allows this, right? So again, right, because he goes like Rabbi Yehuda, even though he's a minority opinion. Okay, so that's the Bet Yosef. Let's see Shulchan Aruch. Het. Right. So it says the Shulchan Aruch, and chotechin hapetila lebet. We don't cut, as we said, right, the wick into two different pieces. אלא אם כן, unless על ידי שנותן שני ראשיה בפי שני הנרות, ומדליקה באמצע, והוא שיהיה צריך לשתיהן, right? So he paskins here the Shulchan Aruch like the Rif, the Rambam, and also the Rosh. So how is that, right? Because the Rif and the Rambam, as we said, were lenient about this, like Rabbi Yehuda. Even though it's a minority opinion, they paskin like that, fine. But the Rosh also added like a caveat here, which is what? He said that's only if you need both candles. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And he brings that from the Yerushalmi, right? So therefore, Shulchan Aruch here paskins like the Rosh as well. It has to be that you need both candles. Otherwise, it doesn't work, this thing. So why doesn't it work, by the way? What's the reason why? Because the whole, the reason why we're lenient about this is because we said, right, when you light in the middle like that, it doesn't look like you're making two wicks. It just looks like you're lighting both of them. That's the way it appears, right? So, right, but that idea only works if you actually need both of them, right? But otherwise, if you don't, right? So then, for sure, right, you're not doing it for the purpose of lighting both of them. You're doing it for the purpose of cutting them. So that's what the Rosh is saying over here, Okay, very good. So I guess we'll stop there. Bezat Hashem. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. And Bezat Hashem, we'll see you. Okay, tomorrow is Erev Shabbat, so we'll see you hopefully Sunday. Bezat Hashem. We'll keep you informed what's going on. Bezat Hashem, God willing. My kids are asking me, Abba, did you go to the kotel yet? I was like, no. So I have to go to the kotel sometime next week.
Go to the hotel. Go for Shakrit. Go for a
Right, Bezat Hashem. You know what it is? What do you call it? Going to the kotel, it's not so close, So you got to take like a bus or a cab or something and whatever, So, or a train. There's also a train that goes there. But the thing is that, like if you're praying in the morning, very early, and you're not so close to there, so it's not so easy to get there so early, whatever. So it's a little bit whatever. So we'll get there, Bezat Hashem. We'll get there. Here's the thing, right? When you go, by the way, to the kotel, maybe you guys don't know this, right? It's a beautiful place to go, right? The place of the temple, Beit HaMikdash, of course, very holy, right? The holiest place in the world, right? So here's the thing, right? That there's a rule that when you go there, and you haven't been there, 30 days or more, which I have not, right? So you have to tear your clothing, when you go there because of the mourning of the destruction of the temple. So I'm gonna have to decide like which shirt I want to tear. I'm still thinking about it.
Rabbi, no free shows, okay?
Okay. Will you buy me a new shirt? It's okay. I'm joking. I'm joking. Okay. So anyway, right, that's the story. You got to make a tear when you go there. So you got to plan for that. And there's also like you have to say something as well. If you look in the halacha, it talks about that, the Shulchan Aruch, about the morning of the temple. So you got to do that. You got to make your tear, and that's the way it goes. Okay, so Bezat Hashem, we'll see you next week, Sunday, Bezat Hashem, God willing, if everything goes well.
Sounds good.
I wish you were with us in Yerushalayim, all of
So
you.
do, so do we.
Rabbi, are you staying another week in
Next
Jerusalem?
time, next time, don't let me go alone. You all have to come with me. I'm sorry, but
Oh, thank you, Kavod.
Yes.
okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll be back. I'll be back Wednesday, Bezat Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the best.
Thank you, Kavod. Shabbat
God bless.
shalom.
God bless. You too. Shabbat shalom, Baruch.